Not all slave-owning mothers taught their daughters to use brutality when dealing with their slaves. As young girls began learning how to manage enslaved people, their mothers occasionally reprimanded them for employing brutal tactics. When Elsie Cottrell caught her daughter Martha abusing an enslaved adolescent, she interrupted her and said, according to a former slave, Henry Gibbs, "Don't you know you will never have a nigger with any sense if you bump their heads against a wall?" Looking back, Gibbs believed that his mistress's daughter engaged in this practice because she was young and didn't know no better. But Elsie wanted Martha to hone her methods of slave mastery in ways that would preserve these enslaved people's usefulness in the long run. White mothers often found their children to be willing pupils who easily absorbed their lessons in slave mastery, but some children clashed with their mothers over the best way to deal with slaves. Mary Armstrong's mother belonged to a couple whom she described as the meanest two white folk would ever live. In Armstrong's estimation, her mother's mistress was particularly cruel. She thought that old Polly was the devil if there ever was one, and an incident in particular brought this to a conclusion. Polly beat Armstrong's 9-month-old sister to death because she would not stop crying. Years later, Polly's daughter Olivia eventually came to own Mary Armstrong. During one visit to Olivia's marital home, Polly tried to beat the 10-year-old. Armstrong retaliated by picking up a rock about as big as half your fist and hitting her right in the eye. She busted Polly's eyeball and told her that was for whipping her baby sister to death. When Armstrong told the young mistress what she had done, Olivia said, "Well, I guess Mama has learned her lesson at last." Of course, not all young slave-owning women diverged so significantly from the methods that had worked for their mothers. Some employed the same tactics, only milder in intensity. As Jenny Brown prepared for upcoming marriage, her parents gave her a pick of their slaves. Elizabeth Sparks was among them. As Sparks and several other enslaved women helped with their young mistress get dressed for the day, she remembered her young mistress asking them, "Which of your niggas think I'm gonna get you when I get married?" They all responded, "I don't know." Then suddenly, she turned, looked at Sparks, pointed a finger and said, "Yeah!" Sparks was deeply relieved when Brown selected her because Brown was a good woman, who would slap and beat you every once in a while, but weren't no woman for fighting and fussing and beating you all day like some I know. She was too young when the war ended for that. Although Brown was prone to inflict physical violence when she deemed it necessary, her mother was far more severe in the forms of punishment she used, beating her slaves with a broom or a leather strap or anything she'd get her hands on, without any legitimate cause. Brown's mother would also manufacture reasons to beat her slaves. She would also make Sparks' Aunt Caroline knit all day and well into the night, and if she dozed off, Brown's mother would come down and cross her hand with a switch.